Hello viewers, I Nishant Sharma, Assistant Professor Motilal Nehru College Evening, University of Delhi, welcome you all to part 2 of the topic formation of a company of the subject business studies. So in first part of this topic formation of a company, we talked about promoter and one of the important documents of the company known as Memorandum of Association. We also discussed the content of the Memorandum of Association. Now part 2, we begin with the second document of the company, which is known as Articles of Association. So firstly, we'll understand the meaning and purpose of having Articles of Association. So firstly, let us understand what do we mean by Articles of Association. So section 2 subsection 5 of the Companies Act 2013 defines articles of association of a company as originally framed or as altered from time to time in pursuance of this act or any other previous prevalent act. Again, this definition does not convey a very understandable meaning of the term articles of association. So if we can recall the meaning of Memorandum of Association, Memorandum of Association was a document which established the relationship of a company with the outside world. In relation to the Memorandum of Association, Articles of Association is a document which establishes the relationship of a company within the company, which means Articles of Association contain the rules, regulations and provisions which are meant for the internal regulation, management and governance of the company. Also, one must remember that the rules which are contained in the Articles of Association are subordinate to the rules of Memorandum of Association. Hence, Articles of Association cannot contain any term which contradicts any of the clause or content of the Memorandum of Association. The way we had content of a Memorandum of Association in form of certain clauses, here we have certain provisions as the content of the Articles of Association. Now the content is actually very long, but some of the major contents has been shown on the screen. For example, the provisions related to lien on shares, provisions related to calls on shares, transfer and transmission of securities, forfeiture of shares, alteration of share capital, buyback of securities, procedures of general meeting of the company, the voting rights, proxy, dividends, reserves, accounts, winding up are some of the major provisions which are there in the Articles of Association. Now coming over to the forms of Articles of Association. So if you can recall the forms of Memorandum of Association, different forms were contained in Schedule 1st of the Companies Act 2013. Table A, B, C, D and E prescribed the forms of Memorandum of Association. In continuation, Table F, G, H, I and J contain forms of Articles of Association. So if your company is a company which is limited by shares, you can resort to Table F for model form of Articles of Association. If your company is a company which is limited by guarantee and having share capital, you can resort to Table G. If your company is a company which is limited by guarantee and not having share capital, if it is a pure guarantee company, you can resort to Table H. If your company is an unlimited liability company and having share capital, you can resort to Table I. And lastly, if your company is an unlimited company not having share capital, which means a pure guarantee unlimited company, you can resort to Table J. Now, one must strive to follow the model forms which are provided in Table F, G, H, I and J, but certain modifications are permitted. If a promoter wants to make certain changes, the changes are allowed. Then we have to understand the difference between the Memorandum of Association and the Articles of Association. So firstly, if we discuss the purpose of the memorandum and the articles, so memorandum contains and defines the objectives of the company, whereas Articles of Association contain the rules and regulations for the internal management of the company. If we talk of the subordination of the two documents, which is superior and which is subordinate, so I just mentioned that Articles of Association cannot contain any term which is violative of the content of the Memorandum of Association, which means the superior of these two documents is the Memorandum of Association and Articles of Association are subordinate to the Memorandum of Association. Now once formed, if the company wants to make certain changes to the memorandum of association or to the articles of association. So this alteration is comparatively difficult when it comes to memorandum of association. However, the alteration is comparatively easier if one needs to alter the articles of association. Then the Ultra Vires Act, an act which is done beyond the powers of the company, beyond the objects of the company, cannot be ratified, which means if it is a violation of the memorandum of association, the ratification is not possible. However, if the Ultra Vires Act pertain to the articles of association, can be easily ratified. Then the content of the memorandum and articles. So loosely, memorandum of association contain the clauses, and those clauses are called the content of the memorandum of association, whereas articles of association contain provisions. And lastly, the entrenchment clause, which usually is not there in the memorandum of association, but articles of association may contain a term called entrenchment clause. So I'll just explain in very brief as to what this entrenchment clause mean. Since the alteration of articles of association is comparatively easier, sometimes they are not taken to be as serious as one takes the memorandum of association. So in order to bring in some seriousness towards certain provisions of the articles of association, company may decide to invoke entrenchment clause. And this entrenchment is actually a restrictive condition which is put against one or more provisions of the articles of association, and with the presence of the entrenchment clause, now the certain provisions against which the entrenchment has been used becomes comparatively difficult to be altered. So if there is an entrenchment clause, articles of association or the certain provision of the articles would be difficult to amend or alter. Then there is this term which is provided in your books called qualification shares. So qualification shares means that once a person is to be appointed as a director of the company, it is expected that he or she has some direct stake in the company. So articles may usually contain a provision requiring the intending director to purchase or buy a certain number of shares in the company. So these shares which are required to be qualified to be appointed as a director in the company, they are known as the qualification shares. Another term which is related to the directors is the directors identification number, or DIN in short. So directors identification number is actually a unique identification number for the directors. So the way we have Aadhaar card number, which is a unique identification number for citizens of this country, similarly directors identification number is a unique identification number for the directors. Now a company cannot appoint or reappoint any individual as a director of that company unless he or she has been allotted a director's identification number, and if not director's identification number, then maybe some other number which may be prescribed. And if a person is willing to obtain a director's identification number, the person is required to make an application to the central government, and the central government most probably will issue you a director's identification number within a period of 1 month from the receipt of the application. Now coming over to the process of incorporation, how a company is actually incorporated. So the process of incorporation can be discussed in certain steps. For example, the step 1 prescribes checking the availability of the name of the company. So one thing that must be remembered is that the process of incorporation has been made totally online now. It has to be done electronically, and the form which is used for incorporation of a company is fully digital, is contained in the form of a web form. So firstly, promoter has to check the availability of name, and now only one name can be provided. So if you are filing part A and part B of the web form Spice Plus, then only one name has to be prescribed for the company, and this can be done through the web service which is available at www.nca.gov.in. Then the second step would be to obtain digital signature certificate of the subscribers and of the professionals who will eventually declare that the compliances have been made. Third step is to obtain a director's identification number. So if your directors do not already have director's identification number, they must obtain the director's identification number. But now, because the process has been integrated in the Spice Plus form, a person need not to apply independently to obtain a director's identification number. This can be done through the SPICE Plus form. Then preparation of articles of association and memorandum of association has to be done. Thereafter, one has to resort to filing of SPICE Plus web form. This is a web form, which means you cannot download it, and it has to be done electronically on the portal itself. This SPICE Plus stands for Simplified Performa for incorporating a company electronically, and Plus stands for the attached documents. So, to this SPICE Plus form, one has to attach INC 33 and INC 34, which actually are e-memorandum of association and e-articles of association. Along with INC 33 and 34, a web form Agile Pro, which is also known as INC 35, has to be attached to the SPICE Plus form. And the Agile, if you can see in the red box, you can see the black highlighted words AGILE Pro. So this Agile Pro actually stands for Application for Goods and Services Tax Identification Number, Employee State Insurance Corporation Registration, plus Employees Provident Fund Organization Registration, and lastly Profession Tax Registration and opening of the bank account. Then there has to be attached a declaration of the professionals. So a chartered accountant or a company secretary or a cost accountant has to declare that all the compliances in relation to the formation or incorporation of a company have been duly met by the promoters. Then there has to be a declaration of each subscriber of the memorandum of association and articles of association that they have not indulged into any default in the last 5 years in relation to formation or incorporation or management of any company. Then the next step is to furnish a verification of the registered office through form number INC 22, and this has to be provided within a period of 30 days of the incorporation of the company. However, verification of the registered office is not required to be furnished if the registered office is maintained at the correspondence address of the company. And also now a company is required to furnish INC 22 active form, which contains the geotagging. So a photograph has to be attached of the premises of the company, of the outside premises and of the inside premises of the company, with at least one director or key managerial personnel in sight. Then the payment has to be made electronically. After the payment, the registrar of company will process the form, and if any defect is observed, the defect will be communicated to the promoters of the company, and two resubmission will be permitted in a period of 30 days. So 2 times the registrar of company will intimate if there are any defaults, and after 2 resubmissions, if the default is still not corrected, then the application may be rejected. But let's just assume for the time being that there are no defects in the application and the application gets accepted, then an SRN will be generated. SRN stands for Service Request Number. Status of the company will be changed from pending to approved, and an email will be received by the promoters of the company in relation to this. Then registrar will issue a certificate of incorporation and the corporate identification number in form INC 11, and hard copies of certificate of incorporation will not be sent. Then last thing to be done is, once the company is incorporated, it comes into existence, directors are required to submit a declaration of the commencement of business within a period of 180 days from the date of the incorporation of the company. Now, once the company gets the certificate of incorporation, this certificate of incorporation becomes a conclusive evidence of the fact that the company has been properly registered and incorporated. Once the certificate of incorporation has been received by the company, no one can question the regularity of the registration. So now the question is, can anybody ever question the regularity of the incorporation? Or is certificate of incorporation really a conclusive evidence of the fact that the company has been properly incorporated? So answer is negative. So yes, in general, certificate of incorporation is the conclusive evidence of the regularity of the incorporation of the company. But the Act also empowers the tribunal to order the winding up of the company if it is proved to the satisfaction of the tribunal that the company has been incorporated after submission of false or incorrect information. However, before passing such an order of winding up of the company concerned shall be given a reasonable opportunity of being heard by the tribunal as to why its registration should not be cancelled. Now coming over to the next term, which is pre-incorporation contracts or the preliminary contracts. So the name itself suggests that pre-incorporation contracts which are entered prior to the incorporation of the company are called the pre-incorporation contracts. And since before incorporation the company is a non-entity, it does not exist, so such contracts are not binding on the company. Also, because the company was a non-entity at the time when these contracts were entered into, a company cannot ratify these contracts after it is incorporated, which means a company cannot be forced to honor a preliminary contract. Then who will bear the brunt of the liability of these pre-incorporation contracts? So the promoters of the company will remain personally liable to the third parties for any pre-incorporation or preliminary contract. Now coming over to the next topic or the stage of formation of a company, which is capital subscription. Now specifically talking in relation to public companies, because they are required to raise funds from the public by means of issuance of securities. So if a public company goes public and raises funds from the public, it has to stick to certain requirements, it has to meet certain compliances. First of the compliance is it has to obtain approval of Securities and Exchange Board of India, which is the regulatory authority in our country and has issued certain guidelines for disclosure of information and for the protection of the investor. So these guidelines are to be adhered to, these guidelines must be followed, and approval of Securities and Exchange Board of India must be obtained by the company. Then the second requirement is filing of a prospectus. So what is a prospectus? Let us first understand. So a prospectus is a document which is described or issued as a prospectus, and it includes a red herring prospectus and a shelf prospectus. It may also include any notice, circular or advertisement or any other document which invites offers from the public for the subscription or purchase of any securities of any body corporate. So it is on the basis of prospectus investors decide whether they want to invest their money into the company or not. So a copy of this prospectus or a statement in lieu of prospectus has to be filed by the company with the registrar of companies. Then company has to appoint bankers, brokers and underwriters, because raising money from the public is again a very complex and lengthy process. So company usually appoint underwriters, and in case the amount of minimum subscription is not reached, then the underwriters come to the rescue and they subscribe the share capital of the company. And for this guarantee to the subscription, they receive a commission for their underwriting of the issue. Then the minimum subscription. Now as per the SEBI guidelines, a company is required to raise at least 90% of the size of the issue. In case a company does not raise or cannot raise the amount of minimum subscription, the issue will fail. So a company has to make sure that it reaches the amount of minimum subscription. If not, whatever money has been generated so far has to be returned back to the applicants. Then a very major requirement which is required to be complied with is to obtain approval of a stock exchange. So company before issuing its shares to the public has to obtain permission of one or more of the stock indices. Any allotment which is made without the prior approval of the stock exchange shall be void. And if all these requirements and compliances are duly made, then the company can go for allotment of shares, and until the allotment is made, whatever money the company has received on the application, that money will stay in a separate bank account, and in case allotment is not made, money will be refunded from that separate bank account to the investors. Now the last topic under this chapter is of one-person company. So let us first understand what a one-person company is. So if we resort to the definition provided under section 2, subsection 62 of the Act of Companies Act 2013, one-person company means a company which has only one person as a member. Now, in general, a company, even if it is a private company, must have at least two members. But the concept of one-person company has been incorporated in the Act so as to extend the benefit of limited liability and perpetual succession to single persons. The threshold limit which has been laid for the one-person companies on its share capital is rupees 50 lakhs and on its average annual turnover rupees 2 crores. So a company which has a paid up share capital of more than rupees 50 lakhs or average annual turnover of rupees 2 crores may not fall within the purview of section 2 subsection 62 of the Act. Now let us discuss some of the striking characteristics of one-person company. So firstly, only a natural person who is an Indian citizen and a resident in India shall be permitted to incorporate a single one-person company and may be permitted to become a nominee of only one-person company. So if you want to incorporate a one-person company, you must be an Indian citizen and must have stayed in India for at least 182 days in the previous year, which is the condition for resident. So if these two conditions are met, you can incorporate one OPC or you may become nominee of the one OPC. You may also incorporate one OPC and may become nominee in the other OPC, but not more than that. At one point of time, you can become member of only one OPC and along with which you can become nominee of some other OPC at the same time. Now, a peculiar situation may emerge. For example, if you are member of one OPC and you are nominee of the other one-person company, and suppose due to your nomination in this second OPC, by virtue of your nomination, you become the member of this second one-person company. For example, if the sole person or the one person member of the second OPC dies, in that case the nominee has to step into the shoe of the member. So the nominee will become the one person of the one-person company, but this nominee was already a member of the first OPC. So in these situations, the one person of the OPC has to decide with which company he or she wants to continue as the member. And for the second OPC, he or she has to bring in some other person to become the member of that company. Also, one-person companies cannot be incorporated or converted into a company under section 8 of the Act, which are the companies meant for not-for-profit purposes. Then a minor cannot become member or nominee of any OPC, nor can be entered for beneficial interest. Also, such companies cannot carry out non-banking financial activities, including investment in the securities of some other body corporate. And lastly, such companies cannot be voluntarily converted into companies of some other kind unless 2 years have expired or elapsed from the date of their incorporation, except when they exceed the threshold limit of the share capital or of the average annual turnover, which means if a company goes beyond the paid up share capital limit of rupees 50 lakhs or the average annual turnover limit of rupees 2 crores, in such a situation, the company may get converted to some other type of a company, but voluntary conversion is not possible unless 2 years have expired from the date of its incorporation. And with this, part 2 of the chapter Formation of Company of your subject Business Studies comes to an end. Thank you so much for watching and staying with us. Have a great day ahead.